Time, but good morning, everybody. I am Margie Heldring, the co-chair, along with Judy McBroom of Grandmothers Against Gun Violence. And we are so glad to have you here this morning. As you know, our speaker today is our Washington State Attorney General, Bob Ferguson. We will officially introduce him in a few moments, but first, in light of our focus on the law and the profound protections and good it can do, I speak of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Here are her words that speak to our mission to end gun violence. Quote, "Do something outside yourself, something to repair the tears in your community, something to make life a little better for those less fortunate than you. That's what I think a meaningful life is. Not living for yourself or oneself, but for one's community." So to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I'll be back in a moment to officially introduce Bob, but to Kathy.
All right, I have, am I on? Okay, I have a few housekeeping details to offer you. First of all, thank you very much for coming. The turnout was wonderful. All attendees will be muted with their videos off, but you can communicate through the chat or through the Q&A at any time. Questions really probably should go into the Q&A, but if you don't put them there, I'll see them in the chat. If you have general comments, those can go in the chat also. This event, it will be recorded and people who are attending today can see it later. So thank you for joining us today, and I believe that's all I have for the moment.
All right, thank you, Kathy. And now we turn to the official introduction of Bob Ferguson. We come to introduce our esteemed Washington State Attorney General. Bob is our 18th Attorney General. He's a graduate of the University of Washington and NYU Law School. He's a man of many interests and accomplishments, and splendid accomplishments. An internationally ranked chess player, a hiker in our beautiful mountains, an endlessly optimistic Mariners baseball fan, a husband, and a father. Today, we thank you, Bob, for your consistent leadership on gun violence reduction and prevention. It is clear the momentum for action has built up over these last years. We hope we grandmothers are a part of that, but we know you are a leader in this. Bob and his outstanding team have been busy since November 2016. They have filed 80 lawsuits against this administration, all in the name of equal protections, civil rights, environmental stewardship, consumer protections, and more. 44 of these cases await a judicial review. They have won 35 victories with one adverse ruling that is in appeals. This is some kind of record. This is some kind of community service. Not only does Bob and his office serve as the legal voice of our state, in my opinion and our opinion, they serve as a moral one as well. Grandmothers Against Gun Violence welcomes you, Bob. We are honored to have you here today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work.
Well, thanks so much, Margie, for that kind introduction. And great to see you all virtually here on a Zoom meeting. And thanks to Grandmothers Against Gun Violence for having me. And thanks for all the work that you do. I so appreciate it. You've all been such wonderful partners in the work that we're doing to reduce gun violence in our state and across our communities across the state. So thanks so much. And I'll apologize in advance if my screen freezes up at all at any point. My two children are upstairs zooming into their classroom, as you might imagine. And so sometimes we have 3 different computers all zooming in at the same time. There's an impact on my screen. So hopefully that won't happen, but it's for a good cause if that's the case. They're up there doing their schoolwork like so many families are right now. And you know, I guess I'll just first say I hope you're all doing well under a really challenging time between COVID pandemic and the fires. It's just such a challenging time for everybody. So I hope you're doing well. You know, my mother, she's obviously grandmother and now a great grandmother. She's 93, I think now, 92, 93. And she lives at the Mirabella. And, you know, she's obviously can't get out like she used to and see the grandkids or vice versa. So it's just a huge challenge for so many folks right now. And just hope you're all doing well, as can be expected under the circumstances. So what I'm going to do, you know, I've spoken to this group before in person, actually. So this one's a little different. But I might add, I'm zooming in from our basement, by the way. So if you see a bunch of kids' toys behind me, that's what we've got. That's what's in the background here. The kids are upstairs in the living room and dining rooms. But I'm going to talk a bit about some issues we're working on, of course, as it relates to gun violence and common sense gun reform. I'll tick through them relatively quickly, just in the interest of time. And then I think if there's time, I'm more than happy to answer a question or two. So feel free to do what you need to do to put those questions in. And what I thought I would do is start with a couple updates on legal cases that have a direct impact on the work that all of you care about related to reducing gun violence. And where I thought I would start is with Initiative 1639, which of course was approved by the voters a year and a half ago now. I've got my years right. And you're all very familiar with Initiative 1639, which adopted some very important common sense gun reforms, raising the age to purchase semi-automatic weapons from 18 to 21. You've got to be 21 to buy a handgun. It makes sense you should be 21 to buy an AR-15. It used to be you only had to be 18 years old to buy that AR-15. Thanks to the people, thanks to all of you, 60% of the people approved the initiative and made the age to purchase those semi-automatic weapons 21, just like a handgun. That initiative also, of course, as you know, required local law enforcement to run a separate background check on the purchase of semi-automatic weapons like AR-15s for mental health records. Believe it or not, that was not required before the initiative. It's required for handgun purchases, but it was not for, again, purchasing an AR-15. The initiative changed that. So now local law enforcement is required to run those mental health checks, background checks. And of course, now there's also a waiting period before you get that semi-automatic weapon. Before the initiative, an 18-year-old could walk into a Cabela's and walk out with an AR-15. Even though an adult, when they walked into a Cabela's to buy a handgun, could not walk out with a handgun because there's a waiting period. So now there's a waiting period as well. So basically it took semi-automatic weapons and put them in the same rules apply to those weapons as applies to a handgun. That's essentially what the initiative did. So it was a big victory. It's worth noting, we tried, you tried, I tried, we tried for a couple of years to get that law passed through the state legislature, right? We couldn't get it through our legislature. Even though Democrats control the House of Representatives, Democrats control the Senate, and we have a governor who said he would sign that bill into law. So I may come back to this later on, but just want to put a footnote there that on the work that we care about, even though we have a Democrat-controlled legislature, on what I consider the most important common sense gun reforms, we've been unsuccessful in getting those passed through the legislature. So I'll come back to that maybe later on when I talk about the legislature. But thanks to the people, thanks to this group, the people approved that initiative. Now, what of course happens is there's immediately a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of Initiative 1639. That lawsuit was filed by the NRA, some local gun right groups and individuals as well, filed a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality. Because that was a citizens initiative approved by the people, one of the jobs of my office is we defend all initiatives approved by the people when there's a legal challenge. Whether that's an initiative I support or don't support doesn't matter. Obviously, I'm enthusiastically support this one, but our job as a law firm is to defend the will of the voters if there's a lawsuit challenging an initiative. So we did that here. My team was in court to defend it. And just recently, I think 3 weeks ago, we got a decision. Our judge is Judge Layton. This is a federal judge. This case was in federal court in the Western District of Washington. That's just the federal court for the western part of the state. That's where the plaintiffs filed their lawsuit. And Judge Layton issued a ruling 3 weeks ago. And the good news is he ruled completely in favor of the state, completely in favor of all of you, right? Supporting, upholding the initiative. So it's a complete victory. Judge Layton, by the way, was appointed by, I think, by Republican president. I want to say President Bush, if I recall correctly. So Judge Lane's no one's idea of some liberal judge by any stretch of the imagination, appointed by a Republican president, but ruled completely in favor of the state of Washington. So it's a big victory. The plaintiffs have, however, made clear they intend to file an appeal on that case. What will happen next, essentially, is it goes to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. You get a random drawing of 3 judges. So it'll be a 3-judge panel of judges on the Ninth Circuit who will review that case, and will be defending it again next time when it gets before the Ninth Circuit. So that's the next step in that case. Maybe I'll chat for a minute about on the state legislative side, on our legislative agenda. And, for the last now, I don't know, 3 or 4, maybe it's been 4 years, I'm losing track of the years. For many years now, I, as Attorney General, I can propose legislation to the state legislature, just like the governor can, for example. It's called AG request legislation. So we draft it, we propose it, we get the sponsors to sign on to it, and we do what we can to move it through the legislative process. It has to go through the same legislative process as any bill that originates with a state senator or state representative, of course. But the legislature knows it's coming from my office, it's coming from me. And so now for a number of years now, I have proposed 2 key bills in particular related to common sense gun reform. One is banning high capacity magazines. Right now in Washington state, there are no limits to your magazines. You can have as many rounds on that weapon as you want. And so we've read about mass shootings in other states, for example, in which the gunman had what's called these 100-round double drum magazines, in which there have been really tragic outcomes where literally dozens of individuals have been killed or injured literally in a matter of less than a minute. How does that happen? These double drum magazines can literally fire off that many rounds in a matter of seconds. And so what some states have done is they have limited high capacity magazines, for example, to 10 rounds. So you can have it 10 rounds at a time on there, but you can't have 100 rounds. And those limits have been upheld by courts across the country, federal courts across the country. And importantly, the US Supreme Court, when folks have tried to appeal those decisions of the Supreme Court has allowed those limitations to remain in place. So the Supreme Court has essentially chosen not to take up those cases and to issue a direct ruling, which is a positive. They're saying we're not even going to take that up. So, it's a good example where we think of Washington as a very blue state, which in some respects it is. But on this issue, we literally can't get that issue before the floor of the state house or the floor of the state senate for a vote. I propose it every year. You've talked to legislators about it. We have sponsors on it, but we've yet to get to the floor of the House or floor of the Senate, even though other states have adopted this legislation. The other bill, and so I will be proposing again next year for this upcoming legislative session. The other bill, which we've also had a hard time getting through the legislature, to put it mildly, is banning the sale of semi-automatic weapons, like the AR-15s. Other states have issued those bans. Those bans have been upheld by the federal courts as well. So legally, the state can do it. But again, we've been unsuccessful in getting that bill through the committees and onto the floor of either the House or the Senate for a vote. And this is after a number of years of concerted effort from a lot of folks like all of you and many others. So I think what I just would say about that, and I'll be proposing that bill as well for the next legislative session. I think between the 2 bills, my sense is that the limit on high capacity magazines is the one that has more support between the 2 in the legislature. And, I guess I feel maybe we've made some marginal progress each session from the session before on that issue, but not nearly enough from my standpoint. And so one thing I would encourage all of you, which you're already doing, I know, but one thing I would encourage you to think about is, I suspect we have folks from all around the state on this call. I see more than 100 folks are on here. And even if you're in a district that has Democrats as your representatives, let's say you're in a district in Seattle, what I would say is to write to your legislators. Do not assume that they are a strong supporter of these bills. I would write to them and ask them specific questions. Hey, is your name on Bob's bill? Right? Have you sponsored Bob's bill? Will you support it getting to the floor for a vote in the House or the Senate, wherever they happen to be? So lots of folks have been sponsors, and we have so many leaders. David Frock, I'm in the 46th district in North Seattle. David Frock lives just down the way from me here. He's been a huge supporter in the state Senate, obviously. So we have champions in the legislature who are willing to stick their neck out on these issues, but we need more. And so I just really encourage you to when you contact or meet with your legislator or talk to them via Zoom, if that's what it is, or writing to them, to ask if they are a named sponsor of the legislation, or they're putting their name on it, because that's what we need more help to move this through and onto the floor of the House or the Senate. So, so for the next session, I do think that we have a chance. We'll see how the elections go this year, of course, but I don't think the Democrats are going to lose ground in the state House or the state Senate. I think they will gain ground. So I think that'll be helpful. It's clear. I think I'm fair in saying on both these bills, I do not believe we have a Republican who has put their name on either bill. I think I'm right about that. And so, which is unfortunate. We obviously reach out to every legislator. We want this to be a bipartisan effort. This should be a bipartisan issue of safety in our communities and our schools. And so, one of these years we're going to get it passed. Whether it's this year or not, I don't know, but it's going to happen. It's a matter of time before we get this done. And just really appreciate any support you can offer with that effort. And also, I just put out there as I start to wrap up and turn to your questions, if there's anything I can do or my team can do to assist all of you in the important work that you do, by all means, to let my team know, to let me know directly. I know we work very closely on these issues, and I so appreciate the leadership that you've all offered on these issues. So just to wrap up, we've got sort of multiple fronts. Defending the will of the voters, obviously in court, is important. One thing I should just add as a side note is there's all sorts of litigation that goes on around the country related to common sense gun reform. Other states are passing laws. There are legal challenges by the NRA to those laws. While we're not a party, the state's not a defendant or a plaintiff in those cases, your voice is still heard in many of those lawsuits around the country, because as Attorney General, I have the power to file what's called an amicus brief. An amicus brief is a phrase that means friend of the court brief. As Attorney General, I can file a brief in any court in the country, even if Washington's not a party, and articulate Washington's interest in a particular subject at issue in that case. So we as an office routinely join other states in filing those briefs on issues related to common sense gun reform. So if that issue is being litigated about, for example, the constitutionality of limiting high capacity magazines, we routinely file briefs in those courts saying, hey, this is constitutional and here's why we think it is. So we have that role. We're defending Initiative 1639 successfully, but keep your eyes on that. That's the big one. Then also advocating for changes at the state legislature as well. So I'm going to stop there in the interest of time. I know you've got a long agenda, and we'll see if anyone has a question or two that I can answer before we wrap up.
Actually, Bob, I'd like to go first.
Sure, go for it, Margie.
Before we go to the chat box, Kathy, is that okay with you?
Sure.
Okay. I am wondering, Bob, if you could share any insights you have or any hypotheses you have about why this is so difficult in our state, given the composition of our legislature, our attorney general, and our governor, and the people's will.
Yeah.
You see, I have
I do have thoughts on that, Margie, so I'll share them. So first, what I'll say is these are just my theories on why it's so hard. I don't know it empirically, of course. Now, that said, I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of legislators, so I have some sense, but think of this as more as an educated guess, okay? Maybe a highly educated guess, but an educated guess. So a couple thoughts. So first of all, what I would say is that I do know from conversations I've had with Democratic elected officials across the state, when I bring up these issues, something I hear sometimes is, hey, Bob, I think these are great ideas. I support them, all right? I support them, but their next word is but. And I know what they're going to say, but you know, my district, Bob, it's kind of a purple district, right? And I don't think the folks in my district would support that. So I just don't think I can get out there on it. Or it's, hey, but I'm worried I've got an election this year. And man, this is just not the time for me to be out there taking a vote like that right now. Maybe come back in a year or two. So those conversations I've had, there's no two ways around that. So where legislators say they personally support it, but for a variety of reasons that are not related to the legislation, they express concern about moving forward with it. You know, that's frustrating, right? And a good example is literally the initiative, as you mentioned, Margie, 60%, 60% of the people supported that initiative. And that exact bill, for all practical purposes, I had proposed, you had all supported to the state legislature 2 years running, and we couldn't get it to the floor of the House or the Senate. It's kind of incredible. It's worth pointing out the state of Florida, Republican legislature, Republican governor. At the same time, we could not get a vote on the floor of our legislature. The Republican legislature in Florida passed the bill that raised that age to buy those semi-automatic weapons to 21. And their Republican governor signed it into law. At the same time, we could not get that passed through our legislature here in Washington. So it's not that other states aren't doing it. It's not that even Republican legislators aren't doing it. So you know, I guess what I would add to that, Margie, is that, I mean, look, is there, just speaking real candidly, is there a political cost to supporting those bills? Yes, there is. I know that from personal experience, okay? I get lots of letters from people. I get letters from people saying, Bob, I used to be a supporter of yours, but hey, you support these bills, I can't support that. And that's a deal breaker for me. So that's real. I mean, it's not a, now that said, I think that I also gain support by being out there on those issues, right? Which I try to communicate to elected officials. I said, well, sure, of course, some people, but hey, there'll be a whole community of people out there, grandmothers I'm talking to now, who will support you, right? That there's an upside besides the fact that I just think it's such an important issue that, oh, you run for public office, why hide from this issue? I mean, I don't know. I think the people deserve to know what you think about it. I think the people deserve to see where their legislators are and take a vote on it. And so, and then just let the chips fall where they may. And things have worked out okay for me in my life politically, despite being out there on this issue. But I do think, Margie, that folks know that they'll hear from some of their constituents. And, you know, maybe the last thing I'll say is that, you know, the conventional wisdom for a long time has been that voting on gun legislation like this is the third rail in politics, right? Touch it and politically, you die. I just don't think that's true anymore, Margie. And I think to the point of Initiative 1639 is such a great example that 60% of the people supported it. And I hope, I don't know that it will, but my hope is that some legislators will see that and think, well, wait a second, well, maybe I really could have supported that thing, right? Even in a purple district, those districts are voting for this common sense gun reform. So I don't know whether that will make a difference or not, Margie, but it certainly can't hurt. And it's good evidence for us to bring to legislators. And we break that down by district. So we can go to legislators and say, hey, in your district, Representative Smith, the majority of folks supported this one, right? And so I think that just that groundswell of where the people are way ahead of the politicians, as all of you know, they're way ahead of the politicians on this. Hopefully at some point, the politicians recognize that and catch up to where you and the rest of the state actually is on that issue.
Can't find the button.
That's okay, but yeah, if there's one more question there, I think we got time for one more.
There are, and I can't seem to, there again. I'm sorry, everybody.
I'm glad you're navigating that and not me. I'd have to go get my 12-year-old son, Jack, to help me handle those things.
Okay, here's a question.
Okay.
Somebody would like to know how many states have approved the high capacity round limitations. Yes, and I think it's about the same number for both high capacity magazines as well as banning the sale of assault weapons. I think a couple more states have banned high capacity magazines. I might get this wrong, but I think it's around 8 states have banned high capacity magazines. They can do it at different levels, 10 rounds, 15 rounds, for example. But I think it's less than 10. And banning the sale of assault weapons, I want to say is maybe 6 or 7 states have done that as well.
How they define assault weapon can be a little bit different from state to state as well, but that gives you a rough sense about how many states have done it. And so, again, states have done it. We have not, and they are constitutional. So I should point out, by the way, just to add before wrapping up, is in California, there was an adverse decision from our West Coast Federal Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit. And in California, I think it was a proposition to the people, but they put a magazine limit in place. And there was a challenge to that. And there was a 3-judge panel at the Ninth Circuit who declared it as unconstitutional. Now, it's different in some ways than what we're proposing, but they made that decision contrary to multiple federal courts all across the country. That 3-judge panel was a conservative panel. These are random drawings, right? So you can get a conservative panel, you can get a liberal one, you can get a mix, right? It's random. So, but it was a tough panel for the state of California. And I think it was a 2-to-1 split on that panel. And again, contrary to multiple decisions across the country. So what's happening is California's appealing that. What you can do in the Ninth Circuit, or any circuit, is if you lose with your 3-judge panel, you can ask the entire circuit court. Ninth Circuit have, over 20 judges. You can ask the entire circuit to hear the case. And so that request has been made, and I would not be surprised at all if the entire Ninth Circuit takes up that case, because it is contrary to multiple other courts across the country. And I think if it's taken up, I'm reasonably confident the entire Ninth Circuit would reverse that panel. So keep your eye on that one. That's a decision that came out, I think just in the last, this summer is when that came out. So that's one to keep your eye on as well.
Well, where can we go to see the sponsors of the legislation you're talking about?
So that's a great question. So what's the best way to do it? So when we go around for this upcoming session, let me just think the best way. I guess the best way, maybe I can simply have my folks in touch with you to communicate that out directly. We have that on our website. And you can even Google, you can do searches on at the legislature for bill number. So once we have a bill number for next year, then you'd be able to search it at the website there. But it's a good reminder. I'll just make sure my team is communicating to whoever the right person is with all of you. I assume you then can put the word out to folks saying, hey, here's this bill proposed by Bob with the bill number. We're in September right now. So we'd be going around getting signatures here in the next couple of months, starting that process to get signatures on it. So it'd be in a couple of months that we'd be getting those signatures. Between now and then, to simply, one can write and say to your legislator, hey, I know Attorney General Ferguson is going to request this legislation again. Hey, will you be putting your name on that legislation when it comes out? So it's essentially the same bill we've had in the past. Sorry, I can't remember the bill number on the past, but presumably we'll get a new bill number, start getting our signatures again. But thanks for that question. We'll make sure we get that to you, and I'm sure that information will get around.
Are there particular Democrats who are blocking these bills, or is it mostly the Republicans?
Well, what I would say is, I guess a couple things I'd say. One is, I think I'm right when I say no Republican has expressed support for either of these bills. I hope I'm not forgetting someone, but I think I'm right. If there is a Republican who supports it, it's a very, very small number. So there's no doubt about that. But the Republicans don't, of course, control the legislature, right? So what I would say on the Democratic side is, I think to especially write to folks who essentially ultimately control whether bills get to the floor. So for the House, of course, that's the Speaker of the House. So in the past, Frank Chop has been the Speaker of the House. Now it's Lori Jenkins. We have a new Speaker, of course, Lori Jenkins, out the Tacoma area. So I think for all of you, wherever in the state you live, to write to leadership, right, like Lori Jenkins, for example, would be important to express your views, whether you live in her district or not, because as Speaker, of course, she essentially leads the whole state legislature, the whole state house, the whole state house. So I would say she would be someone who I think all of you can write to. I've had many conversations with Lori. She is a supporter on these bills. What she has as a hard job is to decide what bills that come out of the committees, right? And we're typically in a committee like the Law and Justice Committee, but the bills that come out of committee, which bills get prioritized to move on to the floor. And there's a lot of considerations that go into that. So but writing to folks like the Speaker of the House, I think, is helpful as well. So I guess I'm a little careful about sort of calling out specific Democrats who may be more of a challenge, because of course, you know, where we're trying to work with those folks. But I think by looking at who's signing on to the legislation, you can sort of work from there to see if their name's not on it. That might be indication that they're not as supportive as maybe you'd like them to be. And so to put that request directly to them, hey, will you put your name on this? I think would be really helpful. And frankly, to share, if you get responses from folks, if you actually get someone to write back whose name is not on our legislation, and you get some information, share that with my team. I mean, that's helpful for us. So Yasmin Trudeau, she's my person who handles our state legislative effort. I mean, she's meeting with legislators all the time about this. I am, of course. That information is helpful as we're trying to move this on through.
What is your best legal argument for a ban on assault weapons?
Sure, and so I'll make this sort of the final question, if that's okay. And so,
that's fine.
So on the ban of assault weapons, well, it's really, I mean, it's from our standpoint, when we think about our Constitution, we all have critical constitutional rights. Freedom of speech, for example, right? Critical First Amendment right. That said, as everybody knows, right, you cannot, in a crowded movie theater, yell fire, right? You don't have the free speech to yell fire in a crowded movie theater, because guess what? You're going to impact public safety by doing that, right? That's an adverse action from public safety. So our constitutional rights, even the most core constitutional rights, like First Amendment rights, have limitations. That's the nature of our Constitution, right? And so when it comes to the right to bear arms, there are limitations as well. And the courts, even the United States Supreme Court, even the conservative United States Supreme Court, recognize that. It's not absolute. The state has an interest in putting in common sense parameters around different rights, including the right to bear arms. And so from the state's perspective, you know, we of course would need to show there is a public safety element to this, right? So we just can't arbitrarily limit someone's rights. Can't do that. And courts scrutinize very carefully, hey, how did the state come up with this as a reason to limit, for example, the right to bear arms? What's the public safety interest? What's the interest the state has in doing this? Can you really show that that is meaningful in some way to take this action? And so that's why, for example, Initiative 1639, look, I'm confident it's going to be upheld as it works its way through the courts, right? A thoughtful initiative, it's very clear. Judge Layden, in fact, I'd encourage you to check out Judge Layden, who's just retiring from the bench, by the way. So this is one of his final decisions. Judge Layden in the Western District of Washington, he issued the decision. Really encourage you to check it out. You'd probably be interested in how he kind of navigates that issue. And so as an example, and I'm probably going on too long, but he talks about, you know, raising the age from 18 to 21 to purchase some amount of weapon. Well, some of it is a common sense analysis that he says, hey, throughout our time as a country, 21 has often been the age of where you can do certain things like drink, for example, or purchase marijuana. So the state has an interest in changing that age from 18 to 21, right? They're not just dreaming up some number, right? There's a rational basis for that particular number, that age that the state, the people are putting in place. So sometimes these courts will take a common sense approach to it. So could a state say, hey, you can't buy something till you're 40? Probably not, right? Well, what's the rational link to that number, right? To that age? 21, hey, there's a logic to that. It's been utilized before in other contexts. So sometimes judges actually take a fairly common sense approach, but the focus is what's the state's interest in whatever limitation we're talking about. And so I'm oversimplifying very complex constitutional arguments, obviously, but if you are interested in more detail, Judge Layden's decision is a good one to start with Initiative 1639. It's not that long, it's pretty straightforward, and we'll give you a sense of it as well. So I just want, before I wrap up, say thanks to all of you again. I just so appreciate all that you do on these issues, and you know, the partnership we've had now for a lot of years. It's great to see you all. I hope you're all doing well. Again, I just want to really emphasize that. I just know it's a challenging time, but just appreciate all that you're doing. Hope you're staying healthy, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I'll pass this program on to somebody else now.
Thanks.
Hello, I'm Kay Bicey from the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence Foundation, and I want to add my gratitude to Bob Ferguson. His remarks remind us starkly how controversial some of these issues related to gun violence are in this political climate. But did you know that there is a growing body of research on the use of assault weapons, on the use of high capacity magazines, in mass shootings in particular, and their tragic impacts on deaths and injuries? There is a smaller but growing body of evidence, research, on those less than 10 states that have passed restrictions on assault weapons and high capacity magazines and the results of those new laws. So there is science to support our advocacy on this and other issues that are controversial. The foundation believes that grandmothers, our members, want and need to be well informed about the issues that we care about. The foundation's mission is to raise funds to end gun violence through research that informs public health and safety policies. To help us fulfill this mission, we are launching an education initiative that will develop educational materials and programs to increase grandmothers, our shared knowledge about gun violence research and gun violence prevention research. If you believe in the power of research and education to end gun violence, if Attorney General Ferguson's commitment to the banning of assault weapons and high capacity magazines inspires you to become more involved, there is a place for you in the foundation and its important work. To get involved, you can contact us on our website, Foundation Grandmothers Against Gun Violence.org, or you can email us at gagvfoundation@gmail.com, and you will find a link to our website and our email address in the chat box today. Thanks very much. And now I give you grandmother extraordinaire, Sarah Dean.
Thank you. I like that title. We're going to show some of the things that the grandmothers have been doing and some of the things that the grandmothers have been active doing, even though we are in a COVID situation. We are kind of on lockdown, but we want it understood that our grandmothers are still in action during this period and during this time. So we'll start with our first slide. We see Jane. Jane is taking action by supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. She stood out in the rain to make sure that people who were driving by were able to see on their way to the march, and then she partially joined the march to let people know that she's supporting that movement. And her friend Jill came with her, and she's part of the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence Foundation, and she made sure that she was out there, rain or shine. They took each other's pictures so that they could share it with you. And Jill, I need your umbrella. I love it. Bert understands that sometimes action simply means standing up for what you believe in. And she is standing up at this point in her neighborhood and letting people know that silence is violence and that Black Lives Matter. So it's important for us all to stand up for what we believe. Liz and her friend are taking action and awareness to the streets, and not just on one day, but every Friday, they stand out by their retirement home and stress a different important social issue that relates to gun violence, Black Lives Matter, and the issues that we are facing today. One of the things we did was we celebrated historic actions. Margie and I participated in a wonderful webinar that was attended by nearly 200 people. And we celebrated the ratification of the women's right to vote. And we also shared some information about what happened with other groups that were not given that ratification in the same way. And we had a wonderful time with our speaker, Anamari Kasi, the president of the University of Washington. We had a great moderator. Jill did a wonderful introduction of Anamari, Dr. Kasi, and Donna kept us going with a lecture that she was giving information so that we could ask questions and be better informed about all of the things that went on 100 years ago up until this point. We've been busy on Zoom, so sometimes we aren't able to get together and we haven't been able to have our regular meetings, but we have met. And if I had a copy of all of the Zooms that we've had, it probably would take up all 21 of these slides. So we've been very, very busy. The foundation on Zoom, the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence on Zoom, the ad hoc committees on Zoom, the different board committees, everyone. We've been on Zoom every, I'd say probably every week at least. So we get to see each other in different settings, but we are still taking care of business. On Wear Orange Day, the committees decided that when they met, they would wear their orange, even though we were not able to get out and really do a lot of marching and the way that we did in the past. But they all went out and took their Zoom calls in and put on a little touch of orange, whether it was a hat or a scarf or a shirt or something like that, in order to keep that color in front of people so that we can understand that that is the color that we select that is across the nation to bring awareness to people about gun violence in our nation. Jane is taking action by writing. She is our secretary, and so I guess she just never wants to be far from her computer. She's emphasizing to people that they need to write their legislatures, get out and vote, and make sure that we get the word out so that we can have people elected to office that will respect and support our cause. Debbie and Sean are a great example of teamwork in action. I'm not sure how many postcards that they wrote, and the back of them, if you notice, are all handwritten, but some of those postcards were used to encourage voters in other states, like the swing states and places where people maybe aren't as encouraged to get out and vote. We're not telling people how to vote, but we are saying to people, your voice matters, your vote counts. And Sue, again, she's a grandmother who always takes action. You see, she's updated her pink hat with all kinds of buttons to show the things that are going on in our country and in our communities. And you notice she's even writing with an orange pen and celebrating the victory of I-1639. And we're taking action to go to the next level or the next legislator. We're going to take our action. We're going to take our voices wherever we can go. And we really appreciate the legislative committee for the work that they do. And the queen of all letter writing and all postcards and all of everything is Donna. And she's sitting here with 3,000 letters that were sent to vote forward. She sent 600 postcards for Team Cunningham. She also participated in 2 huge phone banks, and you see her covered with some of the letters that she's sent out, but she's action-packed mailing. That's what she's doing. She hasn't rested, she hasn't stopped. She's making sure that we all are able to realize the importance of voting and the importance of this election. So we really, really appreciate those 3,000 letters. Amazing. And she wants you to know too that you can participate. You can be a part of that just by contacting your voting registration place and finding out ways that you can help. Or you can contact Donna, who's the chair of our membership committee. Louise took her information straight as a course of action, straight to the police chief and in Bellevue. And very, very exciting by doing these things. We don't know who's watching. We don't know who's going to take a picture. And this picture ended up in the newspaper. So we want to know that when we use our voices, when we speak up, when we take our cause outside of our homes, we do have a voice and our voices do matter. No, I don't know how that slide turned, but this is a great picture that is Liz and her hubby. And I don't know how it turned sideways, but this is the proactive poster couple. And they ended up showing wearing their mask, being social distancing, taking care of business and taking care of things to do. And they became kind of like the poster couple for the extraordinary times that we live in. And this is in both newspaper and on the website of the Seattle Times. So we really appreciate Liz and the work she's doing. During this pandemic, the Diversity and Partnership Committee that's co-chaired by Winona Hollins-Haig and Cherie Rowe Proctor worked together in order to put together a GAV statement. What are we doing when we look at social injustice? How do we feel about the way that our country and our world is going? And we put together, the ad hoc committee put together this statement with Winona as an advisor, Barb, Cherie, Deb, and I. And we worked really, really hard on Zoom calls, on telephone calls, through email in order to craft a statement, presented it to the board, and with a few changes, like a million, but with a few little extra changes, we came up with something that we are all very proud of. And if you would like to have information about it, it is available on our website. Beverly, who was very active with the C4 and the C3, she attended the Black Lives Matter marches, and she is just like one of the people that really got out there, really focused, really came through. And I wanted to make sure that this slide was included to show that she was basically out there and marching and putting forth an effort to make sure that the word is out there. And so Beverly's not just in action some of the time, she is always in action. Another person who's always in action is our Winona, and she's probably the queen of action. So we have her at the marches, we have her at the Parks and Recreation feeding program, we have her loading food into baskets at Bailey Gassard, we have her at the Central Area Senior Center. And if you notice what she's holding up, she is holding up the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence form that we made. On the back of that form is what to do in emergencies during COVID-19. So that card is very helpful for people to look on the back of it and find out where to go for help. She also was at a different march, and again, she was out again with our cards that were donated by the foundation and some of the members of the group. And Maureen, if you're listening, your cards are on the way. And on the back of those, it tells you if you're in an emergency, if someone is suicidal, if there's domestic violence, if your children need assistance, if there's parenting assistance that you need, there's food that you need, if you need housing or any of those things, all of that is on the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence resource card. So we thank you, Winona. And I managed to get out. I didn't march. I drove my car. You can't see it, but it's right close by. But I made it to the rally, and I made it to the rally with 3 generations of activism, my daughter, my granddaughter, and myself. And the rallies were really very, very exciting and very, very powerful. And the last thing that we want to say, and these are Debbie's grandchildren, the best action of all is spending time with our grandchildren as we strive to make the world a safer place for all grandchildren. And Debbie was out enjoying her grandchildren and taking a break from the postcards. So we want to thank all of you for attending this event. We hope to see you in person soon. We're going to keep working to make sure that we have an opportunity, though, to stay in touch. And please continue to send me your pictures of the things that